All right, welcome to another episode of the Construction Hall of Fame podcast, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. And today I have a very exciting episode, an exciting guest in Dave Burrus, who is currently a project executive with Clark Construction, has built some amazing projects over his career. Just speaking to him was overall a phenomenal experience, and I think the industry is really going to benefit from hearing our podcast we put together today. So thanks for being on the show today, Dave.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matt. Pretty excited. I'm not familiar with this stuff, but when you get my age, I don't do a whole lot of podcasting stuff. It's more for the younger group. But yeah, glad to be here. Glad to talk a little bit about what I do and what our company does and how I got there and some of the really cool jobs I've been able to work on through my career because I've been a very fortunate individual. So yeah, super excited, Matt. Thanks.
Yeah, through our conversation, I was able to pick that up definitely, and I'm really looking forward to this. So you really segued well into it. Let's just kick this off by sharing with our audience your story of how you got to where you are today as a PX at Clark.
Yeah, sure. So, I come up through the trades. My grandfather, my father, my brother, all tradesmen. Born and raised in the plumbing community, part of the union when I was growing up in high school and college. Basically ditch digger for 6 years before I got a degree to go out and not have to dig ditches anymore. But it built a really strong work ethic in me. College teaches you a lot of things, but more importantly, it teaches you how to learn, which is super important. So as I, go through my career, when I graduated college, I've been in a couple of different places. I was in the steel industry for a number of years up in the Northeast, and I worked around the world on different steel projects, building steel mills, which is really neat and exciting. Just huge machinery, hot metals. It's a really cool place to be. Unfortunately, that economy, ebb and flows. And when you have a family and you're raising people, you got to get something a little bit more secure. So about after 8 years of doing that, I found an opportunity, actually about 10 years after doing that, I found an opportunity with Clark Construction. So I moved from Ohio to Dallas, and I started my adventures with Clark. And it's been a really, really fun ride as I've gone through that. And I've been able to work on just a ton of different types of projects. My first project was a light rail tunnel station in Dallas. It's the only tunnel station in Dallas, and I was fortunate enough to be the project lead on that when we built that. And then from there, went on to Memphis to do a convention center. And then after that, I went over to Houston and I started my airport career. And in 2002, I really got my first taste of building airports. And that is my passion. Since then, I've done a lot of different transportation stuff, but airports are where I really thrive and enjoy myself. It's a super technical aspect of building. There's nothing cookie cutter about it. You never do the same thing twice. And your clients are the passengers on the airplane. So it's really neat to go through that. So I've, focused on aviation for a long time. But every once in a while, you got to go out and do something a little bit different to keep everything, exciting within itself. And like for right now, I'm building the new Lackman Museum over here in downtown LA, $600 million museum, right at the tar pits. Everything you can think of is here: tar, sands, fossils, ton of concrete, a really neat engineering design architect from Switzerland. So it's a really cool job. And then moving on to airports again after I finish this one. So yeah, so I've been a lot of different places. I moved around a lot. One of the things that you're able to do when you work for a company like Clark is you're able to kind of have a choice of where you want to go. So like I said, I moved from Ohio to Dallas to Memphis to Houston to LA. Then I went to Abu Dhabi for 9 months. I came back to LA, and then I went to Denver, and then I went back to LA. So, building some of these kind of unique jobs, you don't really do a whole lot of them in the same town twice. So you have a tendency to move if you want to. So that's afforded me that opportunity. So those are kind of some of the jobs I've won on and been able to run and be part of a great team that was able to build those. But I can tell you the most special job that I've done in my career is actually not an airport. It's an intermodal facility over in Anaheim. It's the Arctic Intermodal Transportation Center right next to the baseball stadium there for the Anaheim Angels. If if anybody looks out and goes to the games, they can see it. It's a lit up bubble. It looks like an armadillo or a roly-poly, as we call them when we were kids. But it's a really cool job. The job won just a ton of awards, and it afforded me to have the opportunity to be nominated by E&R Magazine as top 25 constructors of the year through E&R, which was a pretty neat achievement. I actually didn't know such a thing existed until I was nominated, and I actually got selected and went to New York City and had a really neat time. But it's companies like Clark that afford me the opportunity to go build these really, really cool jobs. But, obviously can't be built without the right team. So having that team with you is critical. So that's a little bit about me, Matt.
Oh, thank you for the intro. That's huge. And like we talked about, worked on some really amazing projects you won awards for, not only that. So one thing I want to touch on, going back to something you said in the beginning, was about work ethic and how that was built at the beginning of your career, because we actually talked a lot about work ethic in our first conversation together. So I'm curious, it's kind of a segue, right? But for you, when it comes to where you feel you've been able to develop, or what you think has been able to develop you into where you are today, what has it taken? What's allowed you to excel as an individual in construction? Because people want to know, right? What can I do to get to where maybe you're at in a position in their career someday? So what would you say has allowed you to excel?
So, it's like the simplest question with a really simple answer that's kind of odd. So my dad was a plumber, but before he's a plumber, he's a football player in high school and got a college scholarship, and big guy and really, really good at football. First semester in spring practice, throws out his shoulder. He's a tight end. He's done. His football career's done. So he has to go figure out something to do. He becomes a plumber. His dad was a plumber. His dad is a plumber. So he went up through dropped out of college, went to work in the field as an apprentice, joined the union, worked his way up, and worked very hard to finally become vice president of the largest mechanical contractor in Oklahoma. And he did that through that hard work ethic. He used to always tell me, he tells me the same thing I tell people that I work with. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but nobody's going to work harder than I work. And my dad used to always tell me as I was growing up, he said, as you travel in this career, to be successful, what you need to do is you need to do three things. You need to be the first guy there to turn on the lights. You need to be the last guy there to turn off the lights. And you need to walk the job every day. You do those three things every day and you'll be successful. And what it means by doing that is, if you're the first guy there, you're going to get a lot of work done because you're also the last guy there. So your days are going to be long. And, it's going to take a lot from you, and you got to be willing to give that. It's not just the things that get handed to you aren't the things you work for. And when you work very hard, and I challenge myself all the time because I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I'm educated, but there's a lot of people that work for me that I've worked with that are way smarter than me. But I'm a firm believer that the work ethic that I have, that oomph factor, as my dad used to call it, which oomph is the oomph to get off your ass and go do it, is instilled in me. And I've had some really great mentors within my Clark community, between Jim Ansari, who's a senior vice president for us, as well as Lou Pondrani, who's a senior vice president for us. And they've always given me things to think about as how do I get my job done with that work ethic. And one of the stories I remember is I was told, I said, it was kind of an analogy. It says, if you try to go through the door and the door's not open, go through the window. The window's not open, go through the chimney. If there is no chimney, dig a hole, but somehow get inside the house. And that has always registered in my mind about there's nothing we can't do if you don't try hard enough. So that oomph factor, that work ethic, that push, that you want to succeed at all costs to get done and be right, and make sure you're building something that somebody's going to remember. Make sure your staff's happy about working for you. Make sure the architect, when he looks at that building, you ask him, is that what you expected? And he looks back at the renderings and he's like, yes. And you get those types of things, and it's all because of that work ethic. So that hard work ethic is something that I think in today's world we've lost a little bit of. And it's really hard to explain that to people. Some people get it, some people don't. But as a project exec trying to train the people that are going to come up and take my job, That's what I always tell them. I always tell them that hard work ethic will get you so much further than anything else you do. And be willing to do the menial tasks. As a project exec, I was asked to go to a job we had, and they had some issues with doors, and they said, go fix the doors. And I'm, okay. So I'm out there with a grinder. I'm out there with the workers. I'm out there with plans. And as a project exec, you kind of don't do that anymore. You manage people that do that. But there's times to come where you roll up your sleeves, put your boots on, and you just go do it, because that's what needs done. And never saying no is the way to be successful. So to me, those are the things that really ring to mind what it takes to truly be the best at what you are, of whatever it is you want to be. And for me, I'm a project executive for Clark. I've been a construction executive for Clark. I've been a senior project manager. I've been a senior superintendent. I've been a superintendent. I've been a project manager, been a project engineer, and I've been a field engineer. I've been able to, through my course of my career, traverse between the field and the office, and it's like a switch hitter in baseball. I'm just as good left-handed as I am right-handed. So, and that's because I'm willing to go do it and I want to go do it. So that's, for me, Matt, that's the difference maker. And we got to get these, the younger generation to understand you got to do whatever it takes to get through that door.
Bought into the team's success overall as well, just like doing whatever it takes to help the team succeed. And at the end of the day, that helps you succeed. And it goes back to me and our co-founder at Big Leagues days playing baseball and up through our days in college, right? The idea is, some people are thinking, and you talked about this in our early conversation, it's like some people are also just wanting to fast track their career to a point where it's faster than it makes sense in the industry, or for many types of companies who advance people through the ranks like you advance. And in baseball, the idea is there's really no time to stop giving your all. There's no time to stop improving. It's really every day you want to give it your all, give it your best. And it's the same idea. When you're in your career, if you be where your feet are, if you stay in the moment when you're in your career and just do the best you can every day by the people you're working with, by your teams, that is what's going to add up by showing up every day and doing what you said leaders do to progress, to eventually get you to that point. And to your point, sometimes people want to get there faster than maybe the expectation was set, or maybe the expectation they had for themselves based on what other people are seeing, or maybe the instant gratification and culture is something that's just becoming more common. But what would you say to the person who might have had a different expectation about how fast they could advance, about what the value of patience is over a career, and working hard through the patience, even when you think it's taking longer than expected?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. And it comes up in every annual review. It comes up in every 6-month review of your annual review. The younger people are saying, what do I got to do to get to that next level, right? And there's a couple of different things that I try to explain to them, because today's world is definitely different than when I grew up. Because when I grew up, the project manager was it. You were a project manager or you're a vice president. You're an engineer, you're assistant PM, a PM, or a vice president. Very small scale. And most people ended up being PMs. And being a project manager is a great job. Think about the term project manager, manager of the project. You are the person, you're in charge, right? But nowadays, it's not like that anymore. Nowadays, there's engineer, project engineer, assistant PM, PM, senior PM, project exec, sometimes a senior project exec, then a VP, then a senior VP, and then blah, blah, blah. And it just goes on and on and on. And everybody wants to travel up this food chain so fast. And what I try to explain to not only the younger people, but even the people that are in their, late 30s and early 40s that are still trying to get to that next level is, we don't want to send somebody to that next level that can't do the job and it guarantees failure, because that's just a really bad place to be. And there's so many things you need to learn, and it's just not about the number of years you've set doing something. So getting that well-rounded education of all the different aspects of what it takes, in my world, what I call a true PM, is super important, because, we struggle with this too, because, we get on these big jobs, like the job I'm running right now, again, $600 million. So it's 4 years, and you get somebody that's going to run trades for, 2 or 3 years, and they're only going to run those trades. So what we try to do is educate them on all the other things they need to learn how to do before they leave, because the next job they may go do may be going from a $600 million job to do a $20 million job that they're now in charge of. They're responsible for safety. They're responsible for quality control. They're responsible for RFIs, submittals, the processes, the procedures, the staff, the dealing with the owner, the dealing with the architect, because they're it. They're now truly in charge. Whereas on these big jobs, they're kind of protected because there's always somebody way up here, either, these bigger jobs, usually a vice president and a couple execs, working their way down. So what I try to sit down and talk to people is, don't get caught up in how fast can I get there. You should get caught up on what do I need to know and learn to get to that next level. And the people that work with me know that I'm very, very clear on that messaging. Not a believer in promotion because, you want a gold star or you've been here 3 years and therefore you get promoted. It's like, can you do the job? Can you do the job? Are you willing to do the job? Do you put in the time? Do you think through the box? Do you make sure things don't get messed up? Do you hold yourself accountable? Are you looking at all different aspects of what we do in construction, whether it be in the field or in the office, or whether it be a subject matter expert or a quality control manager or a safety manager? Those all have their own roles and responsibilities, but, making sure you have all those tools to move to that next level. And you should theoretically be doing that job before you get moved. So those are the things that I look. What's that? I'm sorry. No, I was just saying, those are the things that I look for. And then when I sit down with the staff, and especially these 20 to 33-year-old people, this group that's now coming up, they're all looking at this fast pace. And I think that's kind of getting clouded because of some of the other industries that are out there. You look at the IT industry and things like that, they work on a different wavelength. I mean, when you think about an IT project, their projects are like 3 months, 4 months old. If they don't get them out the door in 3 or 4 months, it's outdated. Whereas construction is still construction. It's still 2 to 3 years on a project, and lots to learn from that aspect. So.
And it seems like also from what you said, that one of my takeaways is going to be having a consistent path of communication between you and your team as a leader, so that you're telling them really what their gap is from being a proficient XYZ that they want to advance into. And if you as a leader give them the transparent communication about that, and they then as a team member take the initiative and go the extra mile and put in the work like you're talking about to cut their learning curve, to get more mentorship, to take the chances to go the extra mile, then they're going to, in turn, cut their learning curve by wanting to go the extra mile. But it still takes time. There are still some things that time can't take away in terms of managing a project from soup to nuts, like we're talking about. It takes a certain set amount of time to do that. So what you're saying makes so much sense. It's a group effort between the leadership and the team member to come together to help one person take control of their destiny and their career at the end of the day. Because that's what this is about, is how do I ultimately control the controllable in my career, which is doing all the input I can to get the best output possible based on everything I can control, right?
Yeah. And what I would recommend for, young people coming up is ask questions. Go to, I'm 57 years old, right? So if you're a young engineer, 20s to 30s, go talk to people at my age and say, what did you do? How did you get here? Ask those questions. We'll tell you what we want you to know. And we always just sit down and explain during those reviews, but showing that initiative to come ask, I tell all people all the time, when you're out in the field, talk to the carpenter that's sitting there building the formwork. How long have you been doing this? What do you find exciting about it? What do you find fun about it? What do you find not so fun about it? But have those conversations with those tradesmen. So, because theoretically you're in a way managing them, but if you never understand what makes them tick and what makes them go, then you're kind of missing the point. That's why it's so important to me to talk about that. I started as a plumber digging ditches and hauling pipe for 6 years. Is all I was allowed to do. And it built that work ethic of what does it take to handle a shovel? What does it take to do this? What does it take to do that? So when you're analyzing and you're moving up in the ranks, managing trades, looking at schedules, you understand what it truly takes because you went out and talked to these people. These tradespeople, they love having a conversation, especially with people from the office. So please, I would like to suggest that everybody go do that. because it is so important.
Yeah, it's the classic piece about you hear about leaders who oftentimes are some of the most successful. They've risen through the trenches. They've done almost all the jobs within the company, so they understand where different people are at, which helps them have more empathy as well as a leader to understand where their team's at, understand the process of, really in the trenches, what does it look like for a day in the life to actually also more effectively lead. I think about it oftentimes too, just delegating really anything. If you haven't done it and you really don't know it, then and you don't have a solid understanding of the process, it's a lot harder to teach someone effectively, right? So You're nailing a lot here. This is super valuable.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of, again, I'm going to show my age a little bit, but back in the day, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have Siri. We didn't have Google. We didn't have any of that stuff. We didn't have Windows. We had DOS. Like, I had a 286 microprocessor. And I remember I went to a job once. We were doing a water retention pond in Pennsylvania. And we were doing a slurry wall and jet grout columns. And we were building an impermeable wall around this because it was leaking up on a hill. And they were afraid it was going to, crumble down and all this water was going to go all over the city and blah, blah, blah. So I went there and they were talking about impermeability and what does it take and how do you do it? And I come from a different industry and I'm like, okay, I'm hearing this, but I have no idea what they're talking about. Yes, I went to college. I did all this stuff. I had soils classes, but they're talking about stuff that's way up here. And I could have easily just sat there and said, well, this is for you guys to figure out, but by Friday you need to be done with this, you need to be done with that. But what I did instead is, and I worked in Pittsburgh and I lived in Youngstown, Ohio. So I drive to work, come back from work, and when I came back home that night, I'd drive over to Youngstown State University. I'd go down in their library, their microfiche location, which if anybody knows what microfiche is, it's these film cards where they're printed papers on. There's like 50 on this little slide that you put underneath this big lens and it shows up on a screen and you read it like a newspaper. And I did research on what impermeability was, how do you test it, found out there's differences between European style and American style, went back and reviewed our specs. So I spent like 6 weeks at the university just understanding what it was I was managing. Nobody asked me to do that. Nobody told me I had to do that. It's just I knew that I didn't know, and I had to figure it out before I could ever go tell somebody else that they were right, wrong, or indifferent. And it really helped me because the things that were being asked were not possible. The engineer was never challenged, therefore he would always ask for it. But then I learned about it. I'm like, no. Here's what you need to do because here's the research. Here's where the research papers are. A lot of people see like ASTMs and they assume ASTM 234, just follow that. But nobody goes and reads what ASTM 234 is. So go read it. Go research it. When you're being challenged to go do something, make sure you understand what that is. And now you're fortunate with having everything this internet provides, which is everything, to go do that with almost little or no time effort. So that would be my recommendation. But that's, again, I look back at how do I get where I got? It's because those extra things. Nobody asked me to go do that. Nobody told me I needed to. But I knew in my heart that I could not go out there every day if I didn't understand what they were doing.
And for me, that just goes back to some quote I heard years ago by someone named Sam Ovens, who's actually in a totally different industry. But he said a quote that stood out to me that I heard one time. It was just believe in your ability to figure it out at the end of the day, because no one was born knowing everything. The idea to think that, having a level of ignorance about something is a bad thing is not. It's just a room for growth if you think about it like that. So if you just take it as an opportunity to grow and you just go out there and, like you said, hit a quick Google search, do a quick Google. It saves so much time for everybody in many situations. So just believing in your ability to figure it out and then taking the initiative to actually get that done, and not just believing it, but actually taking action to get it done. That right there for me is huge. And it stands out in really almost all fields, right? Like this is a trait of just a winning individual who's striving for growth and who's willing to take the initiative to put forward, the effort it takes to grow, right? So super, super valuable. Actually, segue here. I'm curious. So as a project executive, you've been doing this for a long time. You did come up through the trenches, but granted, you've been a project executive for many years. Like it's going on 20 years, right, as a project executive?
Well, let's see, since 05. So yeah, I'm at 22, or I'm at 17 right now, going to be 18. So yeah, it's been a long time. But everybody's asking me, why are you still a project exec, Dave?
That's awesome. Actually, what do you love about being a project exec? I'm curious. If people ask you that all the time, what's your answer for that?
Yeah. So, obviously the next step after project exec is vice president, which I have no interest whatsoever in being, because I'm a builder by trade. I'm a builder by heart. I'm a builder by mind. If I'm not out in the field, I mean, my office is out here right next to the job site. If I'm not out in the dirt, kicking the tires every day, I don't know what I would do. That's where I feel the most comfortable. It's where I think I'm best at. Obviously, the company hopefully feels the same way. That's why I'm here. But when you start going to those other levels, you start only dealing with problems. You start only dealing with somebody's calling me because I got to go fix something, versus creating the plan, implementing the plan, working through the plan, working through the teams, training people, dealing with the architect, dealing with the owner, dealing with the trade partners. It's all those things wrapped up in one that, is so exciting. And I remember, like, every time I get ready to start that next new job, you would think we would have this base, and there's this basic cookie cutter, here's how you start up a job and stuff like that. But every job you start up is something new, right? You start from scratch, you build your procedures manual, you build your team, you build your trade partners, you build your estimate, you build your fee, you build all this stuff up from nothing. And that's really enjoyable. And then you watch it happen, and then you close it out, right? So that process of the build is just really what every day I wake up just super happy. Like a lot of people are like, in the afternoon, they'll say, hey, they'll say something to me, and I'll say, good morning. And they're like, it's afternoon. I said, no. If I'm happy, if it's morning time, I'm always happy, because I'm always happy when I wake up, because I always wake up happy. If something happens every day and I don't get as happy, then maybe afternoon is afternoon. But my response is morning. Everybody on my team knows if I say good morning in the afternoon, they know it's a good day. But just what we do for a living to me, is like super exciting. Honestly, I do wake up with energy every day. I still get up. I'm still the first person here to turn. I'm actually second on this job. There's one young superintendent that has felt the need that he has to beat me every day, but I am second. So,
have you heard the story about Kobe Bryant, where Kobe Bryant would show up first to the gym every day, and then someone showed up earlier than him, so he shows up earlier again? I think that's how the story goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I just saw a documentary on him, and he was talking about why Kobe was so hard on some of the other players, and he's because they don't have work ethic. That's what Kobe Bryant said, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, work ethic. And like Elon Musk right now, I don't know if anybody's ever heard the story about Elon Musk, but he didn't have a chief scientist, rocket scientist. He didn't have the money to pay the good ones, and the bad ones weren't worth having. So he went and taught himself, and he was the chief guy. I mean, how do you do that? I mean, that's initiative, right? And that's what we're talking about here. In our industry, it's different. Is how do you build? How do you know how to go build? How do you know how to go create a schedule? How do you know how to go create a safety plan? How do you know how to go create all this stuff that everybody else is going to use? And yeah, they're going to trickle stuff in it, but somebody has to be that creator, right? And that's really that's my passion.
And for me, this is my take on everything you're saying as well, is I believe that it's actually a luxury to love your job, to love your career and love what you do. It's basically a necessity for most people in the world to have a career. So a lot of people are blessed to have a great career. Some people are unemployed, right? Some people go through other things. So perspective-wise, you're blessed to have a career in the first place. So to say that you have to love it, I urge people to find careers they love. But sometimes life just, life goes through seasons and whatnot, and you might find what you love later. But my point is, regardless of whether you love it or not, it's you want to show up every day and you want to give it your best. But also, it sounds like, for you and me, we're lucky people. We have the luxury. I wake up before my alarm every day. Say my alarm starts at 6. I wake up before that every day because I'm excited to get up. Like, I have a team to serve. I have clients to serve. I have candidates to serve. Like, this gets me really excited, and I'm passionate about what I do. I love what I do for many reasons. So it's like, I consider us lucky and blessed as what we do. And like, it's not for me a given. Like, some people consider it a given that everything should be, perfect in the career. But I believe a lot of times it's about working for that. Because there's a lot of times in the past when I've done, my career hasn't been perfect. I've been in situations that weren't ideal, but I loved it the whole time, honestly, because I've been able to learn so much, and I don't take it as failure, as much learning and growing. But yeah, I think we're so blessed, just as a takeaway, to have something that we feel passionate about, that we actually love to get up for every day. It really is a blessing in my perspective.
Totally agree, Matt. And, everybody needs to understand that you're not going to be successful at everything you do. You're going to make decisions that are like, holy crap, that was a bad decision. But it's a decision you made. So now you got to go fix it. And it's the people that go fix the decisions that they made are the successful people. The people that make a bad decision go, oh, well, darn, gee, we'll get it next time. Those are the people that you got to think about, right? But going to fix your own mistakes or fix a problem that you created are the memories that you're going to remember. Most of the memories that are just perfect and everything's great, you don't remember most of those. But I guarantee you, those mistakes you made and how you fixed them, you remember every single one of those. I can tell you story after story after story of mistakes I made where I'm like, here's what I should have done. Here's what I did do. Here's what I ended up doing, over and over and over again. And that's another thing my dad taught me when he retired. He retired really early. And I said, why'd you retire? And he gave me a bunch of reasons why. And he said, but you need to think about this. If you think you know it all, if you come to that point in your career where you think you need it all and you know it all, you need to retire because you're so wrong. You will never, ever, ever know it all. There's nobody that knows it all. You can always learn. You should learn every day. Everything you do, you should take something from. If you just look at every day, wake up every day and say, today I'm going to learn one thing. That's all I'm going to promise myself. I'm going to learn one thing. And then you research, at the end of the day, you go back and say, what did I learn today? Those are what keep us going. I portray that kind of like golf, right? You go out and play golf, man, first tee, you're doing great. Second, third, fourth, up to 17, it just sucks all day long. You get on the 18th hole, you make that 30-yard putt. You're like, man, this is a great game. Same thing.
Exactly. And the same goes back into the Hall of Fame for baseball players. It's known that if you're a baseball player and you hit 300, which means out of every 1,000 at-bats you get a hit 300 times, you most likely go into the Hall of Fame. That's a pretty dang good lifetime batting average if you bat 300 over the lifetime of your career. And if you bat 250 or 275 with a good amount of home runs, you'll even make the All-Star game still if that's your yearly stat line. So the point is you're failing a big majority of the time. So it's like, how do I overcome and learn to work through adversity, learn from adversity? And that just goes back to a motto we keep on our team, which I heard from a book called The Slight Edge. I think it's by Jeff Olson, but it talks about just getting 1% better every day. If you can focus on being consistent and getting 1% better a day, then, after 100 days, in theory, you're 100% better, right? So that's the gist of it. I agree so much. It's like you're going to have times where you fail consistently, but it's like, how do you learn from each one of those failures to where next time it happens, you can approach that situation with a better perspective to hope to overcome it more effectively, right?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, Matt, what you're saying about how do you move through your career, right? It's those things that you learn that help you go to that next level that you can teach somebody else and you already know.
Definitely, 100%. And more on this line of really building teams. You mentioned building out teams and whatnot when you take on a new project. You've built some phenomenal projects from essentially soup to nuts as a PX, PM, super, going down the line like you said. So when it comes to building teams specifically, what does that process look like for you when you focus on building out a team for a new project?
So, typically what it starts is, we don't get the choice of up front who comes to the team. You have like this team started with 5 people. Now we have 32, all right? So you start with this core group, but what you do is you establish, the culture of that group. What is the culture of the team going to be? Because as you add people to that team, that core group that already knows what that culture is, they understand what that culture is, they understand what the goal of the team is. They then relate that to the other people next to them that are coming in, and the other people next to them, and other people next to them. And then by the time you get to this full crew, everybody's bought in on what that culture is. They all understand it. And I, as the exec, I don't have to tell and teach every single one of them. I only had to tell and teach that first few people. And as long as they believe in you and they buy into you, which, the only way they're going to do that is if you prove it. And you got to prove it at the beginning. Here's why we do this. Here's what I need you to do. Here's what I'm holding you accountable for. Okay, here's where we made a mistake. Let's veer back over here. Let me explain to you why we do this. And build that culture of, we're there as a team to succeed, and here's why, and here's what our goals are. And then they teach the other people. And then as exec, you go and do other things while that team is expanding and learning off themselves, and they're building that culture within themselves. So at the end of the day, you've got this fantastic team that understands everything you want to do that needs to get done. They've trickled in their own ideas about how I need to change that just a tad here or there. staying within the goalpost. And then you have these great, successful jobs. And again, to your point, I've been very, very fortunate. My jobs that I've worked on have all been very, very successful. And it's not because I got lucky and I got the right job. It's because I got the right team. It's because I got the right client. It's because I got the right architect. It's because the messaging we were trying to do was correct. It's because we weren't banging heads every day. It's because we have the right trade partners, because we have the right types of contracts, because, we just set it up right. We set it up for success, and then we prosecute that work as successful as we can. So to me, it's just that initial. And I always relate, when I talk to the team, it's about training, right? It's about training what we do every day. So every day forward, they can do that. And I always use the adage of, if you think of a baby elephant when they're born, they put this ring around their foot and it's got this chain that goes into a stake in the ground. And the baby elephant's really, really small, so it can't really move that chain. It knows that it's got to stay right there, right? As the baby elephant grows up, it becomes a mammoth elephant. It's huge. It could do whatever it wants. But in its mind, I've got that stake in the ground. I really can't go. I can't do it. I got to do this. This is where I need to be. And that's the same thing. It's kind of the same idea that you're training and teaching this culture that stays within them as they grow, and that never changes. They constantly get better and better at that.
Right. That makes so much sense. So much sense. Question, how involved are you in the hiring process when it comes to building out a new team? Do you interview new team members before they?
I do. I interview. Yeah, I interview quite a bit for the company. Every once in a while, I'll be interviewing specifically for my job. Like if I have a specialty, like if I'm looking for a scheduler. So I'm a big scheduling buff, and it's an important part of me personally. So when I get a scheduler for my job, I'm part of that decision-making process. Some of the other team members are core team members within the company, but then we hire a bunch of people, right? And as we start looking for more and more people, I sit in any interview that's part of a person that potentially could come to my job. So at least I have a say of whether or not I feel they would be a good fit. And then I do a lot of interviewing just for the company as a whole that the company may hire. But I do like to have the ability to have discussions with people before they come to my job of whether or not we hire them. And it helps them understand. I think it really helps them too, because especially if they're going to come to my job, because they need to understand who they're working for. I try to be very clear on what to expect and what the expectations of them are, what I'm looking for, what the team needs, what the job needs, and then what the company needs ultimately, because they'll only be with me for a short period of time and then they're going to work for the company, right? But as long as they're here on this job, they're working under my umbrella. So it's really critical that those conversations take place. And my response back to me has been very, very well from those people who I've hired. Now that if they've gone to another job since, we have a gentleman who's a project manager, and he was here at LACMA. I hired him. I was part of the interview process. He came to work for me here. And then since then, he's moved on as a project manager. He's running our Beverly Hills job. So he's now the PM in charge of that. And we still have discussions about that interview. I was with him 2 days ago. We had a discussion about the day we interviewed 2 years ago before he came to work for Clark. And he's like, I remember when we had this discussion, and here's what we discussed. So, it is really important when you're able to do that. You're not always able to, but I do like to strive to do that.
Definitely. Yeah. And especially to have someone as passionate as you to be able to represent the company who has gone from, pretty much, the ground floor to project executive, and you have such a deep understanding of the job, of the team culture. You work to create the team culture. So you being able to have that eye on the process really helps. And the reason I want to dig in on this is because a lot of companies wonder, how can I make sure the people I recruit align with my culture? Because a lot of companies will have the term, for example, project coordinator. A project coordinator at one type of healthcare builder in particular will do different work than another healthcare builder's definition of a PC, right? So when we talk to these companies, it's like, how do you give people the best idea of what a day in the life looks like, what the culture looks like before they show up? So there's not as big of an issue with turnover. There's not as many, surprises when someone shows up to the job. But the question then becomes, how do I do that? And from my perspective, a lot of what it comes to is investing time in the hiring process, not necessarily making it a long, drawn out, months long process, because that will cause you to lose talent oftentimes, we found, but taking them to job sites, having them meet multiple people on the team, have them maybe even review a day in the life of someone who they would be working with, these are all things that we've seen really help increase the familiarity throughout the process, right? Including having people like you who are leaders on the team to have another set of eyes on the interview process. But have you seen things like that working? Or maybe what are some things you do to increase the familiarity before you bring someone on to increase the likelihood of stickiness?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a couple of different things. One is, we have a full-fledged internship program at Clark. So this summer we had 4 interns here on this job. Last summer we had 3. Of the 3, 2 of them work here on this job right now. They interned here, they liked it here, they went back to school, they got their degree, and they came back to work for this job. So that internship process is a really good way to, dip your toe in the water with not having to commit, but you get to learn what they do and say, does that work for me? Because as the employee looking for the position, it's got to be a fit for them too. It's not just about, I'm the employer, I need people, here's a position I have available. But as an employee, what do I need as an employee? Because different people have different needs. I remember I had a senior project manager work for me one time. She was one of the best senior project managers I've ever worked with in my entire life. And when she came on board, I said, okay, as part of this process over the next 2 years, I want to get you to that next level. So here's my step plan that I'd like to work through with you. And she was like, no, I have zero interest in being in your position. I have a bunch of stuff that I like to do on my own time, and I watch what you do, and that time doesn't exist with you. And to me, my life, it's more important to do that right now. So it was very clear. She was very upfront with me saying, here's what I want to do. So we didn't spend time on that. We spent time on other stuff within her job realm. We have, project managers and, assistant superintendents and superintendents that, we meet, we bring out to the job saying, here's one of 2 jobs you may be vying for. Here's what we do on a daily basis. So we try to do as much of that as possible. With the COVID world, we really got hammered by not being able to do that. There's a lot of people that are like, don't want to do that because, construction was full open. We were all working. Yeah, we had off day, on day stuff in the office, but in the field, they were full bore. So we kind of had that miss for like 2 years. But before and since then, we absolutely like to have those discussions, bring them out to the job, bring them to the office if they're going to work for the office, have them introduce them to some people. I've got 2 people I used to work with 10 years ago that are on this job. Before we hired them, they came out here to see what we were doing. We talked about what the roles and responsibilities. We met some people, looked at what they did. They spent half a day out here, a day, talking and walking and understanding what we do and who they be working with, to exactly your point. And that makes things so much easier because then everybody walking in is walking in wide open, eyes wide open. There's no, I didn't know I was working out of a trailer. I thought I was working out of the main office in Irvine. No, here we are. We're in a trailer. It's a field job. So, those surprises are never good, and they leave bad taste in people's mouths when they think one thing and they get something else, and it could have easily been solved by just, hey, let's spend a half a day. It's not going to cost anybody anything in the big scheme of things. It makes a huge difference.
That radical transparency through the hiring process is huge. I've found that's huge. Totally agree from our perspective as well. So glad to hear that the practices you're using are similar to what we're finding. Actually, the people who we have worked with who have the best retention clients-wise are actually doing with their candidates. And it's what we suggest to people who actually don't use it, is to take on some of these practices to give their company a better shot to overall have a more effective hiring process, right? Because what we're talking about also, for the right people, it will get them more bought into your company and your culture when they see these types of things. And for the wrong people, it will repel them. And that's a good thing. We actually want to repel the wrong people because it's about what they want too. And if they find out that it's not what they want, good. That is actually good for everyone. Let's not go through the process of hiring, ramping up for 90 days, dealing with turnover, dealing with refill costs, dealing with ramp up costs, dealing with all of that. Let's just realize I want what's best for everyone here. I wish you the best. I wish us the best. And let's just go find someone else. And I hope you find the best career possible for you. Right. So.
Yeah. And don't feel bad about it. I mean, don't feel bad because, you think you want to do this and you get there and you're like, ooh, this isn't what I wanted to do. I was thinking it was something different. Have those conversations early. I had a young engineer left here just a little bit ago. He's working on this job, first job. He was here for a year and a half. And what he discovered about himself was he liked construction, but not the construction we did. He liked the framing, the apartment building, the small town type stuff, building a house or building apartments, stuff like that, versus build a mega job that has 30 people in it, it's worth this much money and has all these other things going on. He just never felt comfortable. And he finally came to me and said, look, I love being here. I love the team I'm with, but I am not happy. And that is the easiest conversation to have, because the answer is, I'm glad you figured that out, because you would not be successful if you would have continued. So now that you figured it out, go do what you need to do. Door's always open. Thank you for telling me. Let's finish out strong before you leave. And those are great. Those are easy conversations to have.
Yeah, and sometimes in your career, you just don't know until you try, right? So like giving yourself
Sure.
the opportunity to try and the opportunity to learn, maybe fail, maybe realize you love it or you don't love it. How would you know if you didn't do it? But at least what can come from these situations as well is the relationships you develop, the people like you who say doors always open, or who you got to leave a positive impression on. And when you think back on it, if you hear an employee say, hey, I wasn't passionate about this work, but you still saw them show up every single day, be consistent with their work, do a high quality attention to the pride in the work that they did, that says something about that person in general as a quality of employee, as a quality of human being, and their pride in their work ethic, I should say. So basically that speaks a lot as to like how they hold themselves in their life in general. And some people say, and I believe firmly in a lot of ways, the way you do something is the way you do all things to some extent. So if you are doing that for something that you didn't necessarily love, then imagine what you'd be doing for something you did love. And if at least you stayed on par, you didn't drop, then there's a lot to love there about the potential for the future of that person.
Totally agree, Matt. Totally agree.
Definitely. So I guess a couple quick things here to cap this off. This has been an awesome episode. So I'm really just looking forward to the community to hear this. But real quick, so if I'm young in my career in the construction industry right now, and I'm looking to, someday get to where you are, we touched on it earlier. We talked a lot about work ethic, and it might just be work ethic as the main answer. But what advice would you give to someone who's young in their career, and they're looking to rise through the ranks? What would it be?
So obviously work ethic, because that's just such an easy thing to say. But I think another thing that I think about when I do that is when I look around at the people working, and I see people, they got their head down, they're plugging through it and they're plowing through their work. They're not gallivanting around. They're not taking 1 hour lunches. They're really focused on what their job is, because at the end of the day, it is a job. There's a company paying us to get a work product done that has a deliverable that we need to do. And you should always have fun at what you do. You should always have fun at your work. But there's going to be times where you just got to focus, plug, get it done, turn it in, be done with it. And, some people have that and some people don't. Some people will say, you've given me a task, you need it by Thursday, but I can't make it by Thursday. I got to do something, or I just, not going to do it. So I'll get it to you when I get it to you, versus the person that says, oh, you need it by Thursday? Okay. So if I got it by Thursday, I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to work till 6 tonight. I'll be here early tomorrow morning, and then I'll get it done by 6. Right. People that analyze the request and, facilitate the deliverable is really, really important. And it is easy to spot. I can tell you right now, from a project exec that sits in my world and I walk out amongst the team, I can know really quickly who I can give a task to and make sure it gets done, and who I can give a task for and I've got a risk. And I have to do follow-up to make sure it gets done. That's a real apparent. It comes off really, really quick. And some people may not even know it. They may not even know they carry that. But for those of us who've been around a long time and kind of watch this happen over and over again, we pick up on these traits pretty quick. So I would recommend that, make sure you understand what your goals are that somebody's giving you, and make sure you understand the question being asked. Make sure the time frame of which you're being asked to do it in is reasonable, and if it's not, have a conversation about it. And then if it is reasonable or it can be done, put your head down and get it done. So I'll go back to the house. Door's not open, go through the window. Window's not open, go through the chimney. When no chimney, dig a hole, but somehow get inside that house. Go solve that problem. So to me, that's what I look for, and that's what I think people that want to get to that next level, when we're looking around on, because you have all these engineers that want to be project engineers that want to be assistant project managers, that want to be project managers, that want to be project execs. Ain't everybody getting there. It's just not going to happen. So some will fall off and go do something else. Some will just end up as and a project manager is a fantastic career, but some may not get to that level of project exec for a number of reasons. And one of those reasons may be, you got to be able to work through those hard things and be willing to do it. Roll up your sleeves. Like I said, go out to a jail and work on doors as a project exec. Do whatever it takes. So that would be my thoughts, Matt.
Right. And something you said there is how you could pretty much spot someone, pretty quickly when you could tell like what their real like work ethic or attitude around putting in the work or getting, tasks accomplished for the greater good of the team is. And it goes back to a quote I heard where, once you've done a good amount of hiring or you really understand the job, there comes a point where for some people, or at least hopefully a majority of people who do hiring, that they can spot an A player pretty close to the moment they meet them, like, relatively quick in terms of working with them. And they can also see their gut feeling when they think this might be a B, a C, or, maybe someone less than that type of player as well. So you could just tell pretty much right off the bat. And what this person said was not only do A players typically more than not prove themselves to be A players, but they can prove themselves not to be A players too. Like you could be wrong, but someone usually isn't off the bat in your gut a B or a C, and they prove you wrong and they're an A, right? Like typically up front, just based on your gut, it's telling you something. Once you know the job really well and you have a chance to interact with them and you see them in the trenches, because there are intangibles about these people. What we're talking about right now is intangible. What is your action threshold? How important is getting your team's job done versus what you're doing outside of work or outside? And look, for me, I'm like, hey, to each their own. I'm not here to tell anyone how to live their life. There's give and take in life. If you're the person who wants to not work as much, okay, great. But then for me, don't get upset when you're not a project executive. Don't get upset when you don't get the raise. My dad always used to say, and he says all the time, the cream rises to the top most of the time, right? That's how it works in life. So, knowing that, if you know in your heart that you're not putting in the extra work more than the other person, if you're not showing up to the gym before Kobe, right? If Kobe's showing up before you, don't be mad when he's the one who gets the interview after the championship and he's the one who, gets a lot of the credit for what's going on. So it just goes back to, I believe like having a sense of entitlement is often like something that leads to, unhappiness in life. And it can just lead to I believe that self-awareness is also a big key. So just knowing yourself and knowing what you're really willing to put in compared to what others may be putting in who want what you have too. There's other people competing, and that's just the nature of sports. It's the nature of life. So, to a sense, it is survival of the fittest, right? Like let the cream rise to the top.
Yeah, I'll put it in your perspective, Matt. You're a baseball player, right? I bet you could go out and watch a Little League round robin where they have 15 teams out there. They're all playing Saturday and Sunday. And in those 15 teams, you can probably look out there and watch them for an hour and know who's going to make it in high school baseball. Okay? I mean, it's the same in what we do. The slew of engineers come through. You can tell who's going to move quickly, who may take more time, and who may not really go. Now, there'll always be those surprises. But as a herd, you can pretty much tell. And it can be changed if you're not one of them. That's up to you. That's up to the person. What do you want to do with your life? Because like I said, that senior project manager worked for me. She had no interest. Zero. Had zero interest.
And it helps just set the right expectation. It's like for you, if you're communicating with your team, like which you've done, it sounds like very effectively, it just comes down to figuring out what they want. And there are places on the team for someone who wants to be a PC for their entire career, has no intention to transition to APM, PM, SPM, project exec. They want to be a PC. And actually, they take pride in their work as a PC. They do a good job. Mm-hmm. But they know that if they step up to APM, that's a whole other ballgame. They're dealing with different issues, different, daily scope of work. And they're like, I don't want that. I'm actually good where I'm at. And I love the company I work for. I have no intention of leaving. They pay me well. They treat me well. I'm in a team environment that I love being a part of. But I don't really need to grow here. I want to go grow in my mountain biking club on the weekend. You know what I mean? Like, that's their idea.
That's okay.
100%, right? That's my point. It's like all good either way. Cheers. But just – like the whole expectations thing is really where it's at. If you know yourself and what you want, then you could find the best career path for yourself by being clear about that with your team and then having your team understand that. And it could be a really great situation that way.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree, Matt. Totally agree.
Love it. Love it. So to cap this off here, are there any exciting projects coming up at Clark you want to talk about? Anything going on you want to highlight company-wise?
Yeah, so we've got a couple. I mean, obviously the Lackman job I'm on, but we're also doing J&B Tower, which is over in Century City, which is a 40-story high-rise for a media company and stuff like that. That's a really neat job. We've got a really good opportunity I'm personally working on down in Houston for a couple of airport jobs that are available there. Again, I'm focused on airports. There's a tunnel job over in Ontario we're looking at. We also have T9, which is at LAX, which is a really big job coming out early next year that we're looking at. And so Clark is a company right now where, we do about 5 billion a year across the country. We're not an international company. We're just a national company. We do have our fingers. Every once in a while, we'll go do some stuff internationally. I was fortunate enough to go to Abu Dhabi to work on an airport over there for a little while, but for the most part, we're here in the United States. But we have work across the United States. We're just finishing up Kansas City Airport, brand new airport project, turning that over next year. We're getting ready to start a brand new hospital in Houston, $500 million hospital in Houston. But we also have a lot of the smaller jobs. We have LACCD job here that's, it's a good sized job. It's a $100 million job, but we recently bid a little $20 million job. And we like those small jobs to get our young project managers the opportunity to go run their own work. We're doing Menifee Courthouse right now. So we have a lot of work, and we just actually had a meeting yesterday about, what are the things we're looking at for both this year and next year, because we've got a pretty sizable backlog right now. And one of the things we have to be careful of is don't get so much work that we can't man up and do properly, because there's the difference, right? You can do it, but you need to do it successfully. And successful is ranked in many different ways. So we're careful not to get too far ahead of ourselves. So we're kind of selective right now on what we want to go do. So we're very fortunate.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and actually, one thing just to kind of cap this off, you actually inspired this question, because a lot of the companies that we talk to, they are worried that if they bring someone from overseas, that the project experience, depending on the job, depending on the position, won't be as relevant if they're, for example, let's just say someone like you but let's just say you had never been working in the U.S. or you had brief work in the U.S., then you were working on a project in Abu Dhabi, for example. Have you found issues when trying to bring candidates in a relocation fashion, maybe from other, states or other countries, and bringing them into a certain location in terms of knowledge of the local area? Is it more intangibles, or is it case by case for you?
It's kind of case by case. When the overseas things we don't see a whole lot of. The people that do that are people that come here for an education. They go to USC or UCLA or something like that, and then they come there, and then they brought out. We have a gentleman right now from Australia that's been with us for a number of years. It's going through that process to become a citizen. We're sponsoring him, so we do that also as part of Clark. The state-to-state stuff is, more up to the person. I travel because I want to go build the biggest, baddest stuff available. And in order to do that, you got to be willing to move. And yes, that takes a toll. That takes a toll on your family, on yourself, and all that stuff. But I've known that since day one, and that's just been me. But there's plenty of opportunity to never, ever leave. My brother, same education as I have, been in Seattle for 20-something years. He's never going to leave. And he's worked up there and had a great career. So the great thing about construction is the opportunity's really what you want it to be. If you want to do X, Y, Z, you can go do that. It is up to you. It's making sure you have the conversation with the company you're working with, of course, but it's up to you. So Clark is a company, yes, we bring in people from both overseas and within the United States, transfer people back and forth and around. There's processes for that, but they're not hard to overcome.
And I'm assuming, being that you've built projects in so many different markets, unique markets, state by state, internationally even. So for you, it sounds like you've won awards for a lot of your projects, and that you're building really awesome work. But my question would be, have you noticed a big, difference in going location to location, or has it been rather fluid? Like, you're always problem solving, I'm sure, right? Like, but what have the differences been?
Man, moving from Texas to Los Angeles was like going to the moon. It was so dramatic. And I remember everybody used to tell me, you're not going to change California. California will change you. And I was like, no, we're going to do it this way. And I was hard-nosed, hard-bid contractor. We're going to do it this way. We're going to do it this way. I was so wrong. It is California going to train me. And, it's a humbling experience because the things I thought I could do, I can't do. Here's all these new rules and regulations about city licenses and city requirements and city standards and, OSHPD. I'm like, they build hospitals all over the country. Why does California have their own development group that has to go build an OSHPD hospital? What's so fancy about their hospitals that they've created this own world for themselves? But that's the way it is, So yeah, it's, when I go to other parts of the country, it's not that difficult. But on the West Coast, I'm sure Portland, I know Seattle's the same. So it's a West Coast thing. I think New York City has its own intricacies, obviously. But that Midwest area, it's old school, handshakes and get stuff done. But yeah, it's when I went to Abu Dhabi, it was way easier than going to California. Like everybody was super nice and, to get things done was, efficient and you just had to manage it. But man, coming to California was eyes wide open, buddy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, hey, for me, this has been a super valuable episode. I am quite sure that our community is going to feel the same way. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, hey, Matt, thanks for having me. I'm glad we got a chance to do this. I know we've been trying a couple of weeks, but man, it's really exciting. I love the opportunity to tell young people what we do for a living in our industry, what the opportunities are out there for them, what they need to do to go get it done and make it happen. And then what else can they do if they want to do something a little bit different? But, this is a great career. Construction's always going to be here. And there's no robot that's ever going to go build everything we build. All the other industries are all going to robotics, and we're going to have a little bit out here. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of manpower, women power out there building these buildings and designing them and managing them and all that part that we do every day. And it's super exciting to watch. So I'm just glad I'm a part of it. I'm very fortunate.
100%.
Being a ditch digger got me here.
I want to just give a big kudos to you as well, because for me it means a lot, and it's an emphasis for me with what I'm doing online and when I talk to people every single day, to just be able to emphasize what opportunity is really available in the construction industry. Because like we talk about a lot, there's a lot that's unknown about the industry. There's a lot that's misunderstood about the industry. Stigmas about what construction entails, what career opportunities really are. People just don't know what they don't know a lot of the time when it comes to what's really available. So people like you who are actually taking the initiative, taking the time out of your busy day when you look busy, you're managing huge projects, to actually come over here, take the time to educate people about what's available in the industry, what companies like Clark provide in terms of like going from being an intern all the way up to, a project executive. That means a lot for people who don't even know what's available in construction. So thank you so much for taking the time, investing the time today. And it's really been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I appreciate it. Good luck to everybody out there.